Um, we've got quite a few people that are going to be on the call today. And what we'll do is we'll just give people a couple of minutes to come on board. And so while we're waiting for those guys to join us, I'll just give you a little bit of background about what the purpose of today is. And it's really to help builders optimize their pricing in a way that not only ensures that they're charging the right amount, but they're also going to be able to optimize their pricing into the future. What we've seen in so many of the, of the builders that we've spoken with over the last few years is that they've sort of lost opportunities and profit opportunities when it comes to actually being able to price jobs properly as the prices have changed. And as you guys know, the prices have changed massively over the last last 2 or 3 years because of the pandemic, and it's been really hard to keep up with. So that's the idea of what we'll be talking about today. Just to give you a bit of an understanding of who I am and what I do and where I sort of come to where I bring value to the party. I'm a registered builder or former registered builder. And over the last 3 years, I've interviewed over 700 Australian registered builders. And I've interviewed them about the way that they price jobs, the way that they engage with clients, the way that they position themselves to be able to say to the client, look, we're the best builder for you, without dropping their prices. And that's the real challenge that most builders have, because as builders, we were all trained to be able to put up a frame or to be able to, go through the process of pouring a slab or whatever it may be. But when it comes to engaging with clients in an effective way that actually converts them into clients at a healthy price, that's the stuff that we're not taught every day. That's the stuff that we weren't taught in a Cert 4. So what I'm going to really be doing is talking about all of the pain points that these builders talked about in these interviews. And I'm also going to be discussing what they did to fix those pain points. Now, some of them had some really clever solutions. And so I'm actually taking those solutions and feeding them into this slide pack, which we'll cover today. But the key things that I'll just start off on are just the points that people talked about when they found it really difficult to actually engage and really get clients to engage with them in a way that was strong and positive and put them on a strong point right from the very beginning. So what I'll do is I'll just click over to that next slide. And the key things that people talked about, and at the end of this slide, by the way, I am going to ask people to nominate the types of issues that they have. And so you might look at these 5 things here and say, yeah, that one really is a hot button for me, but you might have others. So please do put them in the chat box. And what I'll do is I'll actually make sure that as we go through the session, I'll actually try to talk to those points and actually address those questions and those pain points. We've got quite a few more people that have come onto the call. So if you're on the call and your video isn't on, please do turn it on so I can see your face. It'll just help me sort of see how I'm going and get a bit of feedback. Thanks, Karen. Appreciate it. So look, basically, as we look at this, what we found was that of all the builders we spoke to, we found that about 80% of builders that we researched were actually undercharging. And the things that they were most undercharging on was by not including the right costs to apply their margins to, or that they weren't actually applying the right margin for their particular type of work. So we're going to be talking a lot about that in the session today. The next one is that the next pain point that they talked about was that when a client first sort of rocks up and says, and they're waving around a concept saying, hey, Mr. Builder, what do you reckon this is worth? For a builder to work that out, it's a loaded question. So what it really means is that the poor old builder's sort of trying to work out whether he should be investing, a lot of time in this client or not, because it takes weeks. It takes absolute weeks to actually come up with a defined and tight project cost. And so there's a big investment and a high risk for the builder. The other thing that people talked about was that most builders, they hate selling. Builders, we were never taught to be really strong salespeople. And in fact, some builders actually hate selling. They feel as though it's not their thing. They feel as though it's sleazy or, it's not really the right way of doing things. And so what I'm going to be talking about a little bit further into the presentation is actually how you can work with clients so that you're not selling to them, but so that you're actually helping them solve their problems. Okay. And completely changes the dynamic of that first meeting that you have with the client. So in other words, you're not standing there saying, hey, I'm Richard and I'm the best builder, you should be building with me. What you're doing is you're saying, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Client, let's talk about that specific issue that you've got on your site. How can we make that work for you going forward? And what that does is it actually changes the conversation from a sales call from the builder into a genuine consultation whereby you're actually able to go ahead and showcase your expertise and add value to what the client gets out of the process. And so what that does is it positions you as a knowledgeable expert, which is what that's what builders are. And I keep on being amazed by the number of builders that I speak to who underrate their knowledge and they undersell what they're capable of, because as you'll see when we go through the presentation, the things that builders are able to address when it comes to a residential custom job are far broader and far deeper than anybody else in the industry, whether they're an architect, a building surveyor, whoever. They've got slithers or verticals of little pieces of expertise that they have, but a domestic builder actually has the full picture. Okay, and so I'm going to be challenging you guys to tap into that over the coming months, and I'm going to show you a way for doing that. I've got a whole bunch of templates that you can download to support you in doing that. The other thing was obviously uncertainty about pricing techniques. The way that we were all taught to price jobs, if you're not doing any builders coaching or if you're not being coached, you may have been taught particular ways of pricing that aren't necessarily relevant for today. So I'll touch on that a little bit. And also a hesitancy to increase pricing. So I often find myself, when we do our interviews with builders, I often find myself challenging builders to put up their prices. And the common response that I get from them is that I can't do that. I'll get slaughtered by my competition. Okay, so, and that's a valid concern. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to show you a pathway to actually overcome that competitive tension that drives your prices down. Okay, so we'll be stepping through all of those to help do that. So I'm just wondering, has anybody, from those things there that we've talked about in the list, does anybody have any particular things that are real pain points for them around pricing that they might just put into the chat box now? One of the things that came up in a conversation just this morning with one of the builders who's coming on today was that he talked about frustrations in there being a lag time between when you quote the job and when the job actually starts. And so one of the key things that I always encourage builders to do is to make sure that you have the ability to update your pricing. If the job's not going to start for 60 days after the contract's signed, or if there's a delay in its progress, what you do want to do is make sure that there's a clause in your contract where you can say, hey, look, if work doesn't start within 60 days of anticipated, then we can recost the job. Okay, so actually feeding it in so that you're not creating a rod for your own back. So, all right. So what I'll do is I'll start moving through it now. Yeah. So Simon, you've talked about competitors undercutting you, and one of the big things, and it's frustrating because the clients are not sophisticated purchasers of building services. When you think about what a builder knows, it's up here, and what a client knows, it's down here, and there's this huge information gap. So there's an asymmetry of knowledge, and so what that tends to do is that clients tend to rationalize things by saying, oh, look, we could go for the cheapest, or we could just go for the one in the middle that, if we've got 3 quotes. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you today how you can actually position yourself as the best builder that they're talking to, and preferably the only builder that they're talking to. So I will cover that. So that's a good question. Yeah, Jonathan Armstrong. My favorite thing is when clients start making up plans to remove meter square of rooms to save them cost, and then expect you to recost it instantly like that. Yeah, that's they don't realize that there's a lot of work involved in costing. I'm actually going to show you how ProCalc can do that instantly. So Jonathan, that particular point that you raised there, when I demonstrate ProCalc to you, it'll show you how you can actually do that. So you can basically take a plan, tweak it a little bit, put it back into the system, and then instantly get a price back. So I'll show that with you. Yeah, Karen, you're talking about when the industry stopped and slowed down, and so it's hard to increase prices. And so, yeah, you're right. What I'll do is I'll actually talk a little bit about that too. So all of the strategies that I'm going to teach you, they are things they are, and the concerns that you guys are raising are genuine concerns. They're real concerns. Like you know what it's like to be competing against another builder who's perhaps working out of the back of their ute. They don't necessarily have the overhead, so you need to do something different that repositions you in a way that means that you can actually separate yourself and really stand out from the crowd. So I'll certainly talk about that. Jeremy, you've also touched on a similar question there, so I hope I've covered that, or I've touched on that now. So that's good. Next thing I want to just talk about is obviously the way that we're all taught to cost jobs. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I know when I was taught to cost a job, it was basically one of three ways. So it was either watching the old boss and working out what they did. And of course, keep in mind, they probably learned to cost jobs 20 years ago, whatever it may have been. And the way that jobs are priced has certainly changed. A builder's costs have changed, a builder's technology, a builder's construction systems have all changed since then. So that's naturally requires the costing system to change. Or in my case, I know when I was doing my Cert 4, the instructor standing at the front of the room said, "Oh yeah, so you cost up your job, right? You do all your job costs and then you whack on 20%. Now, he didn't ever tell me whether that was markup or margin, and I was too dumb to know at the time. I just went, "Oh, okay, no worries, 20%. That's it." Okay. If that's what it is, that must be what it is. All right. I can see a few nodding heads. Caleb, I think you nodded your head right then. And what that is a common thing is that when we originally learnt to cost jobs, that was how it was taught. Or another thing that I did particularly when I first got my ticket, was that I started off at that 20%, and then I thought, okay, well let's put it up to 22%. Let's put it up to 24%. Let's see what happens, and pushing it up and see what happens. And so I finished up going through this trial and error method to work out what the right pricing was that the market could accept for my services. And by the way, I was doing inner metro renovations and extensions, and so I was constantly trying to work out what the market would bear. So I thought to myself, okay, I can get to a certain point, but then after that, you just get too expensive. And so that's where the whole journey started for me, about trying to work out better ways to charge more for a builder's prices. So just on that, and so very, very quickly, there'll be a small number of people on the call that might just need clarification around margin versus markup. And the first few slides here, they're really what I call rookie mistakes, or rookie learnings, if you like, things that you can fix in your business with 30 seconds of application. So in terms of margin versus markup, basically a markup is, you can see in the screen here, the $50 that it is in grey. The markup is the percentage of that $50 divided by the job costs. That's it. That's all it is. The margin is the $50 divided by the total quote price. So 50 divided by 150. So that's a 33% margin. That's all it is. Okay. And to be frank, in my mind, I don't think it really matters that much whether you always refer to margin or always refer to markup, as long as you keep it consistent. About the only time when it really does matter is when you're talking with another builder about pricing and margins, or you're talking with your accountant, or you're talking with a business coach, so that you're talking a common language and the same language. So just wanted to cover off that one quickly so that people understood it. The other rookie mistake that we see quite a bit of is really when builders don't include their actual costs in the costs that need to receive the margin. Okay, so what I mean by that is things like project management, site setup, insurances, anything that is required, any cost, any job cost that's materials, labor, effort, whatever it may be, council fees, whatever it may be. You want to make sure that is folded into your costs, and your site management, your overhead, not your overheads, but basically your everything that is attributable to one specific job, that must be included in your costs. So that's the key thing there. The other thing was just making sure that you're charging the right margins. So we'll touch on that in a moment. The next thing that the next rookie mistake that we see a lot of is that most builders don't realize that when they go in for a competitive tender, the client gets, let's say the client gets 3 tenders. What will happen, and you can almost set your watch by this, the highest tender will be 20% higher than the lowest tender. Okay. And we have seen it over and over and over again. So whenever whenever a client tells you, sorry, Leanne, you're too expensive. We can't run with you guys. You know, the other ones were cheaper. I can guarantee you, you're not too expensive. All the client's done is they've compared you to someone else and said, oh no, you're too expensive. That's it. You're not too expensive. The truth is, if you're in that 20% range, you're actually pricing your jobs well. You're doing the right thing. So I guess the rule number one is don't get pricing advice from clients because they're clueless. They are bloody clueless. All right. So it's really important that you focus on a robust system that you trust and you know, which is what we're going to cover here. All right. All right, so the next set of slides that I'm going to show to you are what I call growth mistakes. And so really these are the sorts of things that you can implement in your business over the next 2 weeks. Okay, so all the stuff that we've covered up until now, it's been quick low-hanging fruit where you can just smash it out and you can smash it out in 30 seconds. The next few slides, it's about things that just require a bit of thought, a bit of application, changing some of the language that you use with clients to make it work. And I'll step through those now. So the first thing is when you're talking about how far in advance you're booked out, I'm going to ask you to think right now, if I imagine I'm a client and I came to you and I said, oh, Karen, can you help me? I'm just wanting to start a job tomorrow. How soon could you start tomorrow? And every one of you would have, when you think about that, you would say, well, some of you might say, yeah, I could start that tomorrow. Others would say, nah, it's a month off before I can start. Others would say 3 months. Some would say 6 months. And believe it or not, some would even say 1 or 2 years. Okay. So I'm going to ask you just to think about it or to write it down, whatever that time frame is. What we see in the marketplace, and we've seen this consistency. So in the research interviews that we did, we would ask that question: how far in advance are you booked out if someone came and actually wanted to engage your services to turn a sod tomorrow, to get it going tomorrow? And they will say, oh no, we're booked out for this far in advance. The longest we've ever had someone say that they were booked out in advance was 2 years. They were actually 2 years booked out in advance. And that was terrifying. That was a terrifying sort of number. And the reason why I say that is not only that prices are going to change in that 2 years, but also because if they are booked out that far in advance, it screams out they're possibly undercharging. And so we've had a handful of builders actually be in that situation. So we ran with their pricing through ProCalc, which gives you market rates. We actually found that they were undercharging by about 20%. Okay. Those who were booked out a year in advance were undercharging by about 10%. Those who were booked out 6 months in advance are undercharging by about 5%. Okay. If you're in that tomorrow to 6 month window, you're probably in the sweet spot. If you're pricing the job, your practice or your efforts properly for the amount of inquiry that you have. Okay. So if there's anybody on the call that is booked out 6 months in advance or more, I would strongly encourage you to start dialing up your pricing, because you just simple economics of demand and supply means that you're not going to hurt yourself if you raise your prices. So and a good way to do that, if you're nervous about that, if you feel that you're in a competitive environment, you can actually just do it 5% at a time. So if let's say that you did have to raise it 20%, you do it in incremental lots of, you do four in a row over the space of 1 year. Okay. And because you booked out 6 months in advance, for example, if you do find you get a bit of pushback from the market, you can always dial it back a bit, but you've got that 6 month buffer to actually do that. So that's a common thing that we see. And I would just challenge you, if you are booked out 6 months or more in advance, that you definitely can put up your prices. The next thing that I just want to touch on is really about applying the correct margins. So I'm hoping that everybody can, the font on this screen, this slide is a little bit small. So can people, Caleb, can you just give us a thumbs up if you can see the font on that bell curve? Can you, yeah? Thank you. Thanks, folks. So look, what we found talking to builders, the typical builder's margin will sit somewhere between 13% and 33%. There are outliers that sit outside that, but that's not the main, the main, 95% of builders are operating within that 13 to 33% margin. What we see as the main drivers that pushes you to the 13% or to the 33%, I'll talk about the 13% first, is really obviously when you're talking about volume builds in regional areas with, larger jobs. It may not be the most sophisticated design, and it's highly competitive. So in other words, you've got lots of builders that are interested in doing that kind of work in that area. Okay, so that's when we tend to see a lot of the lesser margins down the bottom left-hand end. At the other end of the scale, up at the 33%, that's when you start talking about custom builds. You're talking about close to the CBD, architect boutique work, and there's low competition. And I really want to stress to you that the biggest single indicator that we see is high competition versus low competition. Okay, so that's the main difference there. Now, if you're in the situation where you're currently doing, custom builds in a metro boutique, architect sort of work, and you are charging less than a 23% margin. So in other words, you're sitting in, I'm hoping you can see my mouse, over in this left-hand side here, you genuinely are undercharging for your pricing. You really do have the opportunity to move into this territory here. Now, don't worry, I'm going to show you how to do that. So we've covered a bit of territory there. And look, there are a few questions that have come in here now. I might just pause a little bit. If you want to add some questions into the chat box now, please do, because I'll just address some of these now, because I do want it to be interactive rather than me just raving at you. All right. Leanne, what I'll do, can you type that in here, please? Yeah. What I'm going to do is I'll actually circulate after the webinar. We'll actually circulate a recording of this so that you can actually see that. I'm also going to be giving you some freebies, so they'll come around as well. So there's a whole bunch of information there. The document. So Leanne, the document I'm referring to is it's actually the screen that I'm sharing. So you should be able to see that, but if you can't, don't worry, it will be included in the recording, so you'll be able to see it there. So that's all good. Any other questions there, guys, about that bell curve and what I've just talked particularly about that last slide, because it's sort of a fundamental thing that we just need to be across. Any other queries? No? All right, great. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is the need to qualify. So what we also found is that a lot of builders we were talking to tended to not really invest the time to qualify. So the biggest waste of any builder's time is when they put time and effort into asking, going through the whole process with a client, only to discover that they're not the ideal client for them. Okay, so it's a massive hurdle, and so it's easy to say that, depending on how good your marketing material is, you can have as much as 80% of people who knock on your door not suitable for your business. They may not be in your locality, or they may not be doing the work that you want, or they're just not a good fit for your business. And so the questions that you really want to be asking, and this isn't a complete list, but it's certainly a list that is important, and this will be included in the information that I'll send around after the session. The first thing that we encourage builders to ask is, what does a successful project look like to you? Because it's actually a loaded question. So what it does is it actually gets the client, it fleshes out with the client what it is they expect from the whole job, what they think it is. And if it's something like, oh, look, we want to be in by Christmas and we want to be happy and all sorted. What that means then is that you're in a position where you know exactly what their goal is. And so if you, let's say that on December 15, you hand over the keys and say, there you go, you're up and away. What that then means is you can actually say to the client, remember how you said you wanted to be in by Christmas? We've done it. And at that point, the client goes, yeah, you're right. You have done it. You've done really well. And what that does is you can then actually feed that in to a whole lot of other things in relation to referrals and testimonials, which I'll talk about in a moment. So it gives you a set of goalposts to work for. So obviously the goalposts, the finer detail of those goalposts are set out in the contract, but the really main goal that's important to the client, you know what that is before the job even starts, and that's a really important thing to know. The other thing, how did you hear about us? If a client got you off Google, you know that your SEO is working, but the other important thing is you know that they're not necessarily a high quality lead. Whereas if they say to you, oh, look, you've been doing a job 3 doors up from our house, and we talk to those clients and they love you guys, they think you're fantastic. And so, yeah, we really want to talk to you about doing our place. That's a really high quality lead. Okay, so asking where they heard about you is crucial to understand the quality of the lead, so that you can then actually make sure that you can see where your leads are coming from, but you also identify high quality leads from low quality leads. Obviously, high quality leads, you invest time in them. Low quality leads, what you do is you qualify them heavily. Okay, you educate them, you keep them warm, you keep them bubbling along, but you don't invest your own time in them as heavily. The next is, what's your budget? Okay, now I don't think I've ever heard a client answer this in an informed or honest way. So, you look at a job and you think to yourself, yeah, this is $1 million every day of the week. And you say to the client, oh, what's your budget for this? And they go, oh, I don't know, 500, 800, and they're either pleasantly naive or selectively naive, or they have got $1 million, but they're actually thinking to themselves, no, we want to keep some powder dry, and I don't want to tell the builder that I've got, an extra couple of $100K there. I'm just going to say I've got 800. All right. And so there's a real difficulty in getting good, honest information from clients about their budget. So, and that's basically what ProCalc does. It's a system whereby you can take their plans, load it in, and then get an instant price for their project. So it eliminates that question. To be frank, my feeling is that even asking that question of clients is sometimes almost irrelevant, because their answer will always be uninformed and not necessarily give you much information apart from what their expectations are. All right, so I'll talk about ProCalc a little bit further into the presentation. When do they want to start the project? So not when do they want to complete it, but when do they want to start it? Because they've got no idea what's involved in completing it. They just know what they do know is when they want to start it. Okay, so saying, do you want to, if they say, I want to complete it by Christmas next year, that's a rod for your own back. You all of a sudden, it's putting you in the gun right from the beginning to get jobs done faster than you ever planned you'd be able to do them. Whereas saying to them, oh, when do you want to start the job? That puts a line in the sand so that you can then actually go through your natural process as a builder. So it takes the heat and the sting out of that engagement. Where's the job located? The type of project. So the sort of jobs that you like doing. Have they built before, and what was their experience? If they've had a bad experience with a builder before, you want to know about it. You want to make sure that if they've got sensitive pain points around, let's say that they've done it before and there was terrible communication, or that they were hit with a whole lot of variations that they weren't expecting, or whatever it was, you need to know about that so that you can navigate your way around those when they pop up, because they will. It's inevitable that they will. If they're scarred, they're going to share their pain with you. And that's not a criticism of them. It's human nature. That's what they're going to do. So you need to actually flesh out any of those issues before you get too heavily involved with them, so you can understand how to address them. The other thing that you can ask them is, are you comfortable paying for a feasibility preliminary agreement or a detailed quote? Okay. Now, at the moment, on our research, about 1 in every 3 builders charges for consultations before they meet with the client. Okay. If you're one of the other two, out of 3. I'm going to show you how you can charge for it. And believe me, you should, because there's a whole lot of reasons. Your services should never be free. It's not like when you go to the doctors for an appointment, they say, look, come in for the first appointment free. We'll just get out my thermometer and check you out for nothing. That's not the way it works. You are, as I said before, I really want to drive home to you that you guys have a huge amount of expertise. You've got a breadth of expertise and a depth of expertise that nobody else in the industry has. So it's really important that you value that and you actually position yourself as the expert, because that's what you are. So I'll show you how to do that. Similarly, ask if they're prepared to meet for a feasibility on site. And so what that, and the feasibility template that I'm going to give you, it actually is one whereby you look at their site, you look at their designs, you look at the structure, if it's an extension or a renovation, you look at the structure to work out what can be done there. You're actually stepping through the job with them, and then you're actually able to identify what the value of the job is. And what you want to do when you first meet with them on site is actually take them through a process and then give them a report. I've got a free template that I'll give to you with that. That will come around after I'll flick that around in an email. But the idea is that if you're able to illustrate to them that you are going through a process and you're giving them a report which is worth something, they will then not only value your expertise more highly, but they'll even be happy to pay for it. Okay, they will be actually happy for you to pay for you to go and meet them on site. All right, so it's also a great opportunity to build rapport with clients, because as you walk around the site, and you might be looking at say if it's a vacant lot or if it's a knockdown rebuild or whatever, and you walk around and you're talking about the drainage, you're talking about particular issues that might pop up for that job, then it gives them the opportunity to ask a few questions of you, to get a bit of an understanding with you, and you get to know the client, they get to know you. And so you showcase your expertise and you build trust. Finally, the 10th question I've got there, do you have any concerns or questions about the project, process, or us? Now, this is actually a bit of a catch-all. The idea of it is that it's the opportunity, it's an open question, okay? So it's a bit of a fishing question. What you're really doing is that you're asking the client to raise any concerns that they have, and a salesman would call them objections. But what we want to do is we want to get them to flesh out any concerns they have. They might be worried about something going wrong. They might be concerned, if anything that is a bit of a snake in the grass, you want them to talk about it now. Okay, you want to bring it out now so that you can actually address it and make sure that they're comfortable with the way you're going to move forward with it. So at the end of the day, you're walking away from that conversation knowing exactly what they're going to be looking for. Now, I would encourage you to, the way that most builders ask these questions, there are 2 ways. One is to do it on the phone, or you can actually send out an email template whereby you actually say, hey guys, can you just answer these quick questions, because we need to understand more about the project so that we can make sure that we're a good fit for you, and vice versa, and then we'll work it out with you. If they're not a good fit for you, refer them to another builder who might be interested in that kind of work. Maybe you can set up a reciprocal relationship with them. So that's really the key thing there. And remember, if you think back about the jobs that you've done over the years, if you think of the jobs that had a good fat margin, you really enjoyed doing them, you loved the client, it was a successful job, and it was a positive experience for everybody, being you, your trades, the client, everybody involved. That's your sweet spot, whatever that job is. Okay, so that's a real sweet spot. So if you were to say, all right, they're the sorts of jobs that we always want to do from now on, there's a really good way to qualify your clients, because it's something that already fits naturally for your business. If you haven't got something like that, then think about the stuff that you would like to do and what you want to do. And that way you're in a situation whereby you can go ahead and really find the clients that are a good fit for your business and fulfill your strategic goals. All right, so that's the key thing there. All right, so we've talked about some of the growth mistakes that we see, the things that you can fix in a couple of weeks. What I'm going to talk about now are things that I call ninja moves, and they take months to implement. Okay, but all of the things that we've talked about managing to optimize your pricing. It's not something where you can just all of a sudden go, hey, I'm going to whack up my prices by 20% this week. All right. You've actually got to position your business properly to do that. So what we can really do is step through that now. And so, as I say, all of these things are things that will take a little bit of time to implement. But for the first thing there, over on the right-hand side, if you're talking about charging for detailed estimates, which I would encourage every builder to do that. As I said before, about 1 in 3 builders are only doing it at the moment. But every builder really should be doing it. It's the only reason builders are not charging for it is because some guy in the 50s who was a builder decided it was a good idea to give free quotes, and it just sort of spread like wildfire. But the idea is that you really need to let clients know just how much effort goes into compiling a quote. And so in order to do that, it's actually the education process actually starts back earlier on in the engagement. But it's really a case of stepping them through and saying, all right, in order for me to cost your job properly, Mr. and Mrs. Client, I've got to talk to 10 subbies. I've got to go through the process of spending X number of days, X number of weeks, whatever it is, going through and giving them a bit of an outline of the effort that goes into this. There will be those who say to you, oh, but Joe Bloggs down the road, he doesn't charge anything. And the correct answer to that is, well, Joe Bloggs down the road doesn't charge anything because that's what his quote's worth. It's not like he's going to be investing the amount of time that you would be if you're being paid for your time to generate the numbers. All right. There will be some people on this call who are design and construct builders. So obviously charging for prelim agreements is crucial. So so a lot of builders who are doing that type of work, obviously you're dragging in a whole lot of consultants, be it design, be it engineering, soil, thermal, whatever it is. Obviously, when you're bringing those kinds of people in, please always make sure that you charge a margin and also project management fees. You should never, ever work for free. Okay, it's not about, you don't want to be winning the work by giving away freebies. All that does is set up a really horrible relationship whereby the client expects you to do everything that's outside the contract for free. Any little surprise, oh, but hang on, you did all that stuff for free. Why can't you do this for free? It's a really terrible dynamic to have in place. So that's that part of it. Now, this is the next stage here, which is the builder's feasibility, which is basically the first client meeting. So this is the panel on the left-hand side. What you can do, the biggest separator between you and other builders is to actually go ahead and say to the client, look, I'll come to site, I'll do a site review, I'll do a buildability review where I look over the design. We'll do a structural review where we have a quick look in the roof with a torch and a step ladder, and then we have a look underneath at the stumps, the subfloor. Again, just with a torch. I'm not talking about crawling under the house, but basically giving the client that sort of feedback, possibly doing a concept design if they require it, giving them 15 minutes to ask any of the questions that they've got. And remember, every client has 15 minutes worth of questions easily, and they should have too, by the way. They're about to spend hundreds of thousands, if not $1 million with you or someone. So it's really important that you give them the space to ask those questions. And by the way, when you answer those questions, you're actually showcasing your expertise and you're showcasing your process. So that's good. And then finally, they also want to know what's this going to cost me? And that's exactly what ProCalc does, which I'll step you through in a moment. Now, the important thing here, I will give you the template for all of these. It's very straightforward. You just key it straight in and then shoot the report back to the client. It's just a 2 or 3 page report, and there it is. What that does is a couple of things. One, it separates you from every single other builder out there. Okay. Now, whether you charge for this or not is entirely up to you. Okay. None of the things that we've got on that first panel there are expensive for you as a builder. All right. What that does is then you give them the report, they look at it and they go, gee, that was pretty good. We've got actually a whole lot of information here that I need, because the client, trust me, the client will not proceed in their process with you if they don't actually have this information covered in the feasibility first. Okay. So for those of you on the call who have ever had a client who you meet with them, you go out to site, you give them a number, and then they just go silent. And then you give them a follow-up call or a follow-up email or whatever, and they still go silent. And you wonder what's happened to them. What's happened is that they've run out of questions to ask you, and they're not sure how to build the trust with you. Okay. So what this does is it gives you the ability to build trust with clients throughout the whole process. Okay. And what most builders do using ProCalc, they charge somewhere between 99 and 699 for that first meeting. You don't have to charge that. I mean, it's sort of neither here nor there. But the key thing is that you actually give them some value. And as soon as you give them some value, if you were to say to them, oh, and by the way, we usually charge $99 for this, or we usually charge $6.99 for this, they immediately know of the value that you're giving. If you were to actually say to them before you go and see them on site, oh, yes, we charge $99 for this. So let's say, for example, you're concerned about charging for that very first meeting, and you want to be moved very slowly and gently through that. You can actually say to them, look, we do this, we do a full report for you. We come and spend an hour with you on site, and we charge you $99 for that. I would put it to you that any client that balks at spending $99 on an hour of your time and getting a report that gives them the exact information they need to progress, that they highly value this information. They won't go anywhere without it. They won't move forward. Anybody who's not prepared to pay $99 for that is probably a bit of a red flag, in that they may not be the right client in terms of a quality client. Okay. So that's a really key thing to feed into that there. All right. So that's the just in terms of charging for before you go and meet a client. And what it does is this really positions you as the expert, but importantly, it's no longer a sales call. As soon as you're consulting with the client, you're not selling to them, you're actually fixing their problems. And so if you can go in there and fix their problem, or talk about how you're going to fix their problems, and also address some of their burning questions or their burning pain points, what you're then doing is you're actually enabling them to say, all right, this person understands what we need to do. They are aligned with what we're trying to achieve. So that's a really important step to take. Now, the way, just on this too, the way people build trust is that they will often do a small transaction, and then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And so if you think back to when you first got your ticket, you might have been pulled in to do a I don't know, a deck or a pergola or a bathroom, or a small job. What happens is that 6 months later, assuming that you've done a good job on that first engagement, you get a call back from that client saying, hey, look, we've got an extension we want to put on the back of our house, and it's worth 500. Can you come back and have a look at that sort of job for us? And if you do that well, then when they finish up building a brand new home for their forever home or whatever it may be, they come back and talk to you about that. And so, and this is sort of a mini version of that. It's actually designed so that you can build trust with clients as you go through the process. Now, I'm not talking about tricking clients. I'm not talking about misleading them or feeding them BS. I'm talking about helping them understand your process, helping you illustrate to them the process you go to, your expertise, and why you're good at what you do, because most builders do a terrible job of explaining their expertise. And so what this does is it allows you to do that. All right, so I'll just keep moving here. One of the other things that we saw in the research was that obviously the more competition you have, the more competitive that obviously it is, but the lower your margins. So the biggest driver of margins, or lack of, is the amount of competition there is. So I would encourage you guys, and the next few slides we're going to talk about how to do this. I would encourage you guys to always work to be in a situation whereby you're not competing against the world at large or the builder's world at large. You've got a very specific area that you're focusing on. And ideally, the best outcome is you are the single builder involved in a job. We did have a couple of outliers in the research. We came across one builder who was charging between 45 and 50% margin. So that's a massive markup, right? And when he first told me what his margins were, I I did a bit of a double take and thought, nah, you're pulling my leg. But then I stepped through it with him, and he actually was charging those fees. And the way that he did that was that he had engineered an entire process around trust that actually helped his clients or prospective clients understand what was so special. So he was working with, for this particular guy, he was working with architects and only doing architectural builds. When they did the handover to the client, they would then book in a housewarming party where the builder would pay for it. They'd put on French champagne. They would invite all of the client's friends. They would invite all of the architect's client base, and they would invite all of the prospective builders' clients to that party. And what would happen was that the social proof, or the basically experience of those clients and everybody in the room, they would all be talking about the wonderful job that the builder had done. Okay. And so the result of that was that there was the level of trust that prospective clients have in this builder was through the roof. They'd heard it multiple times over a few glasses of bubbly, how wonderful this builder was. Okay, so that's what the marketers would call social proof, and I'll step into that in a moment. But the thing to remember is that your pricing is not a function of getting the highest or the lowest costs. It's actually a function of things that are unrelated to pricing. Okay, so about you positioning yourself as the best builder on the block and the specialist who can deliver on particular things. So I'll go into that a little bit further now. As I say, these are, I'm calling them ninja moves because they are fairly complex and they take a few months for you to implement. But the dividends they pay are huge, to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars in profit every year. So it's definitely worth looking at and just implementing that over time, and your margins will grow and grow over time. And so that specifically in the chat box earlier, there were a few questions about raising prices in a competitive environment or a soft market. And this is the stuff that puts rubber on the road with that. Okay. And keep in mind, when I talk about raising prices, you don't have to do it all at once. You can do it 2%, 2%, 2%, and just keep on doing it until you really get some heavy pushback as you're implementing these things. All right, so the next thing there, just about specialization. I'm running out of time, so I'll try and move through it fairly quickly. When you talk about a generalist versus a specialist, a generalist is when you see that builder, with the signage on his ute or van, and it says no job too big or too small. We do decks, pergolas, first floor extensions, knockdown rebuilds, shop fit outs, office fit out, everything. That's a generalist, and they are competing with every builder on the planet. Well, every builder in the suburb anyway. And so you don't want to be doing that. That's a recipe for driving down your exclusivity. What you want to do is specialize and choose a particular market or a particular niche that you love, that you're passionate about, where you relate to the client, that you love doing that work, that where you can actually put your hand on heart and say, I know our building business is the best in the business at this particular kind of job for a 10-kilometer radius. I know that we do these jobs really well. And if that's a sweet spot for you, you will then be able to grow that. And what I mean by that, it might be a first floor extension specialist, or it might be a knockdown and rebuild specialist. When I was building, we would promote ourselves as an inner metro renovation specialists. Okay. And then we'd have a tagline there for busy professional people. Okay. So what we did was we specialized not just geographically, but the type of work and also the type of market that we were working with. Okay. So we niched it right down. And so what would happen is that with people, when they engaged with us, they would always, they'd say, right, well, I'm a busy professional. I want to do a renovation on my house and I live 2 kilometers from the CBD. These guys do this every day of the week. They know exactly what it is. And for that reason, we were able to charge them an extra margin for that. And look, all of the builders that I spoke to in the research, those who did specialize were able to achieve at least an extra 5% in their pricing. Okay. So I would really encourage you to look at what specializations are available to you. And if they're profitable, in other words, if they've got good margins, it's worth considering that and weighing it up. All right, so I'll just move on to the next one there. Just about marketing, this is not a presentation about marketing, but the one thing that you do want out of your marketing is that you do want to make sure that the demand for your services far outweighs the supply as to what you can deliver. Okay, and so I'm saying that not to give you guys a heart attack, but to give you the ability to say, all right, let's say that our business can deliver 10 jobs a year. We want to make sure that we get 20 inquiries. We want to be oversubscribed. And what that then does is it gives you the ability to pick and choose the most lucrative clients. Okay. So so that 10 that don't appeal to you because your pricing is a bit high for them, they say, no, look, we don't want to run with those guys because they're a bit too much for us. That's okay, because you've got the other 10 that are actually giving you really good, healthy margins that you need in order to plan your future and plan your retirement. Okay, so that's a really key step that you want to make happen. So I would just encourage you to, and I don't want to I don't want to drift into marketing because it's a whole new webinar. But the key thing is that whatever you do in your marketing, make sure that it drives more demand than you can currently supply, and then you can use that qualification process to eliminate those that aren't wanting to pay you a premium margin for your services. All right. Next thing there, just talking about referrals. Setting up referrals is a really important thing, because you know that when a lead comes through to you via a referral, it's generally a high quality lead. But a lot of builders really struggle with it. So I know me, whenever I was thinking about asking for a referral, I always felt really sort of awkward and, get a bit hot and sweaty, and, you're not sure what the client's going to say. And so the best time to ever ask for a referral is immediately after they've given you a compliment. So, and you can do that throughout the job. You can do it at the end of the job, whenever it may be. And it might be that you're doing the final walkthrough, and you're identifying a few things that just need tweaking. And the client says, gee, that kitchen, I just love that kitchen. It's got so much cabinetry there. I've got lots of space to do whatever I want to do. And it's a great, it looks fantastic. I feel really proud of it. That's the time when you can say, oh, that's good. I'm glad you really love it, because I know that the guys worked really hard on making everything look really, really good. That there was a lot of effort went into it. Would you be okay to write a testimonial for us about, the work that we've done for you? And at that point, the client's already given you a compliment, so they know that they love you. It's contextual. It's not like you're trying to drag it, you're just trying to get blood out of a stone by asking for a referral out of the blue. And so you're actually saying to them, look, would you mind giving us a thumbs up and sharing it with your friends, writing a testimonial for us, and letting others know about what we do. And at that point, 99% of the time they say, yeah, I'd love to, because they're already in the zone. They're already in the sweet zone. For those of you that do get into a situation where you're having trouble getting a referral, where they say, yeah, I'll do that. What you can often do is say to them, look, if it's easier, you've already said that you love all the guys on site, you're really happy with our communication, and you love the quality of the work. Do you mind if you haven't got time to write it, do you want me to draft something up for you, and I'll shoot it to you so you can actually say, yes, I'm comfortable with that. So you actually write it for them, give it to them, let them approve it, and then they send it back to you. You can put it on your website. Okay. And that's it. And because getting referrals can be, well, I'm talking from my own experience, it can be awkward. It can be real. I've always felt really awkward asking for them. But once I learned that technique, the number of referrals that we got and testimonials that we got just went through the roof. And so we just keep on more and more and more. All right. Now, just last couple of slides now. The next thing is about building trust. This is really crucial. And one of the things that we found was that it is actually possible to build a system that builds trust. And because when you build trust, that's when you become the preferred builder. You're no longer the price checker. You're actually the preferred builder. You're the top of the client's list. They would much rather build with you because they trust you. They know that you're an expert in their particular kind of job. They want you to do their job. The only time that they might go and look at someone else is when they're price checking to make sure that, that you're not wildly overcharging them. But if you're a specialist and you're delivering on all of these things that I'm about to go through, you can be charging 10% more and they won't bat an eyelid. All right. So that's the thing to remember. So we touched on this earlier, small transactions. So build the transactions up, give the client the opportunity to. So, and the first one, it might be, hey, I'll call you back at 10 a.m. in the morning. Make sure you call them back at 10 a.m. in the morning. The next one might be, I'll meet you on site and I'll do a feasibility review for you and it'll cost you $99. Meet them on site, do it, provide them the information, give them the report. I'll give the template. And what that then does, they've spent $99 with you and they go, actually, that was a pretty good experience. Then from there, they might do a preliminary agreement if you're a D&C builder. And then from there, they'll actually spend money on a detailed estimate, which comes into the thousands, okay? So what you're doing all the way through is you're building that trust and then they're ready to actually spend big money with you on the actual build. And obviously, you don't make money out of charging clients before the build. You really don't. No one does. You're not going to retire in the Bahamas on that. And so what you really want to do, you want to use that to position you as an expert who has expert knowledge and build trust. We talked about the social proof. And so social proof is really sharing. So it's testimonials. It's about people meeting your past clients, case studies. It's about giving them evidence that engaging with your company is a good experience. Explain your process. So the next there is if you've got an infographic about what your process is and the steps you go through, share it with the client. In the stuff that I'm going to send around to you after the session, there's actually a template in there where you can use that. And so basically you just copy what's in there and then you go ahead, or not copy it, but basically use that as an outline for the sort of thing that you could do for yourselves. And what that does is it saves a massive amount of dispute and it helps the client understand the roadmap. And because trust me, most builders don't give this to a client. And so the client, the builder will talk about, oh yeah, then we'll do this, then we'll do that. But if the client doesn't know what any of that is, if they can't see it and read it and feel it and touch it, doesn't mean anything. It just means that they're in a situation where they're going, oh yeah, the builder's got some process. I don't know what it is. But if you're actually able to give them a documented process, and I'm just talking about something that sits on a single page, they look at it and go, this is good. This is what we do. Okay, so this is when this happens, and they understand the process you go through. So you're giving them a bit of transparency. Content marketing, again, this is not a call about marketing, but if you are if you have the opportunity to explore content marketing or using a CRM, I strongly encourage you to do it. I've used a CRM in content marketing before. Some of the builders we've interviewed have used them. And as long as it's done properly, it is probably the single most effective and cost-effective way you can ever market your business. It's massive because once they're in your database and you're able to educate them, then what happens is that you're actually, again, you're sharing your knowledge with them. And I'm talking about educating. I'm not talking about spamming them. Don't send them crap. You've got to send them information that is actually going to educate them and help them understand how they can actually move forward in their project. All right. And then finally, next thing is being upfront about costs. And that's what ProCalc is. And so basically ProCalc gives you the ability to estimate a client's project almost instantly. So I'm just going to show you a quick video now about what that is. And I'll just run that through now. When you're standing in a client's lounge room and they're waving their arms around saying, oh, we want this, we want to do that. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking to myself, I wonder if these guys can actually afford this. That's why ProCalc is important. It's designed so that a builder can produce numbers within 15, 20 minutes. So rather than investing weeks and weeks and weeks in creating that first set of numbers, you can actually take the client's plans, upload them in 15 minutes. You've got numbers. You can shoot a formatted report back to the client that says, here you go, Mr. and Mrs. Client, this is what the industry calculator says your job is worth. Let us know if you'd like to talk further. Okay, so basically that's ProCalc. And what I'll do is
let me show you how we do stuff around here.
Sorry, bear
my
with me.
department uses Monday.
Let's see. When you stand. All right, sorry about that. So basically, what I've got on screen now is basically the ProCalc input. So what happens is you take a set of plans, you load them into the ProCalc system. You do a quick takeoff on screen, and so that's basically that blue area there where you're measuring it, and then you go ahead and fill in some some information there. Now, most of what happens is when you draw it here, it all populates there. There are some questions there that clarify particular things like the quality of fit out and site access and that sort of thing. What that then does is that
when you're standing in a client's lounge room and they're waving their arms around saying, oh,
what that then does is it produces a report that instantly happens once you put all the information in, and that's a PDF report that you can then send off the client. Now, the idea of this is that you can send it to the client, and what it has down the bottom here is a low, mid, and high range. Okay, so what a ProCalc report does is it mimics the marketplace in your local area. Now, I apologise to those. I can see, Matt, you're squinting to see forward what's on the thing. I will call it out to you in a second so you can see. My apologies, the font's a bit small, isn't it? But the idea is that we step through this, and it actually is designed so the client can't pick it apart. So just starting up here, so some of the variables that we've got here are things like full demolition, ground floor area, first floor area, total length of walls, decking, sloping block and excavation, glass doors and windows, outdoor roofs, wet area finishes and appliances, different bathrooms and sizes, powder rooms, kitchen size, laundry, builder's pantry, solar panels, swimming pools, skylights, roof attic. But then we get into the information about the project. So site complications. Is it going to be a challenging regular site, whatever? What are the external walls made of? What are the client design expectations? So where did the plans come from? Did they come from an architect, or did they come from a drafty, for example? Also the state it's in, and also we also factor in postcode. Even the construction contract. So an ABIC contract, for example, is very different to an MBA contract or an HIA contract. And so that affects the pricing. What else have we got here? The tender process. So if you're talking about an open tender where you've got 3 or 4 builders putting in numbers, that will give you a very different outcome from if it's a negotiated tender where you're the single builder. Okay, and that's why we spent a bit of time in the slide pack working through ways that you can become the single builder. There's the postcode there, and then obviously there's a whole lot of extras in there. So every project, it might be hydronic heating, it might be a septic tank, and whatever it may be. But the idea is that you can actually facilitate different variables so that, because every job is different. The way that we came about these numbers that we basically, back about 3 years ago, I created an algorithm that would actually factor all of these elements into it. But then what we did over the last 3 years, we've actually fed over 10,000 real Australian builders jobs through the system. Okay, and so we would feed the job through, and then we would double back and check the detailed estimate value of that job. And so what we've done is we've over time made it better and better. And so the idea is that we're now hitting a 93% accuracy. And so what that means, for every 100 jobs that go through the ProCalc system, 93 of them fall within the range that we talk about. Okay, so that's the key thing that we're trying to do there. The idea of this is that it's not to replace a Build Exact. It's not to replace a Wonder Build or a Procore or a Qubit or any of those things. What it's about, all of our clients actually use ProCalc and those types of software packages. But what they do is they do a ProCalc report first, and then what they do is, once they've worked out that the client can afford it, because they give this to the client, once the client says, oh yeah, I can afford that, that's when they actually feed it into a more detailed estimating system. All right, so that's really the key thing that I want to point out here. So it's not designed to replace your existing estimating system. What it does is it saves you huge amounts of time. So probably 2 to 4 days a month is what we're sort of seeing with most builders. And then you can actually go ahead and fold that into your process, and then you can work out what clients can afford it. As you guys know, probably about 80% of clients, they can't actually afford the budget that you go back to them with. So what will happen is that some of those 80% will just go, nah, we're out, we're gone. Others will actually say, gee, we still want to do it. And there was a question about this from someone a little bit earlier. What you want to do is be able to, they say, look, can we strip out that ensuite? Can we strip out this? Can we strip out that? And being able to actually adjust the pricing at a very high level is a key thing that ProCalc does. So in other words, if they say, look, can we reduce the size of that back extension? Can we not have that second bathroom? Whatever it is, you can actually take those out and then instantly produce the report for them and go, how's that? And as soon as they say, oh, that's better, yeah, we can afford that, they've actually converted to becoming your client. Okay, there are no contracts signed. There are no blood brother handshakes or anything like that. But what there is in their mind, they've gone, this builder can give me what I want. And at that point, you can actually say to them, okay, all right, that's great. Well, Luke, are you okay to go into the next stage, which is where we actually either do a prelim agreement or we actually go ahead and do a detailed quote for you. And we ask you to fund that because it does take, it's not a ProCalc, it's actually we use a system called BuildXact or whatever it may be. And the idea is that you're actually able to say to them, are you okay to fund that? And as soon as they say, yep, that's good, you're away. Okay, you've already become their favorite builder because you've taken the time to give them a structured industry report. And look, the important thing is too, is that when a client does push back on you on price, you can actually say to them, look, this is the industry rate. These aren't even my prices. It's the industry rate. So what that means is, if you want to dial back the pricing, we can. Let's just sit down. We'll grab a coffee. We'll get out a red pen and we'll strike out the plans as to what you're happy living without, and then we're good to go. So it helps you explain to the client that you're not the bad guy, because builders often are not the bad guy. It's just that the price of building is the price of building, and clients aren't ready for it. So that's basically ProCalc. What I would like to do, I am going to send around an email after the session that basically includes all of the information that we've talked about. I know throughout the call I've been saying, oh, I'm going to send stuff around, and I will do that. For those of you who would like to try ProCalc, and it's a free thing, basically grab your mobile, go ahead and load up and book a session in there. What we will do, we will actually, and the best way for you to test whether ProCalc works or not is for you to get a job that you already know the value of, put it through ProCalc and test ProCalc's pricing against your own pricing, and then you'll be able to see the accuracy of it. In that call, we would actually show you how to use it. You can also do a bit of a calibration to make sure it always works for your practice. And then you've got 2 weeks after that to put some jobs through and test it. Okay. And so the idea is that it basically empowers you to no longer be in that conundrum about, a client wandering in and they're waving around a concept going, hey, what do you reckon this is worth? Because that's a loaded question. And I've been on the receiving end of that, and I hated being on the receiving end of that myself. So that's basically the whole presentation. There are some questions here that I will cover, but what I might do, if you do have a question, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask any questions that you have. I'm happy to we have gone over time, and I apologize for that. But I'm happy to sort of stay on the call until anybody that has a question has asked their question. There's a question here from Leanne. How do you approach a client showing you another builder's plans, drawings, i.e. breach of privacy issues? Yeah, look, I would say to you that, Leanne, if a client rocks up to you with another builder's plans, they're just price checking you. That's all they're doing. So you could say to them, oh, look, I could give you a price on that. You could run it through ProCalc, and that would certainly answer the question for you. But I think the key thing is that you really want to do some heavy qualification with that client, that they're not just kicking your tires, and they're not, because if I've already invested money with another builder to actually go through the process of doing all the prelims, they would have a degree of trust in that builder. You don't know what that is, but they would have a degree of trust in that builder, and they might just be using you as a price checker. So in that sort of situation, you might want, I would qualify them pretty heavily and make sure that they're not just pulling your chain. But obviously, with a tool like ProCalc, you could put it in, and 15 minutes later, you'd have a ballpark figure for them anyway. So that would sort of process their inquiry, so that you're not looking stingy and not investing in them. So yeah, it would cover that. Yeah. Guys, are there any questions about what we've talked about? Any questions at all about margins or ProCalc or okay, one here from Jonathan. Does your design source expression category help take into account specialty architectural features which may not fit into other categories? Absolutely. So what we do is we actually have 5 categories. So there's volume and project, then there's drafty, then there's building design, and then there's architectural, and then there's what we call we'll call it a sort of almost like a high-end bespoke architectural. And so what we do, Jonathan, is we actually, all of those grades, they all adjust the fit out and the finish of all of those products. So in the whole time that we've been using ProCalc, that we've been doing ProCalc, we've probably seen in total, I reckon it'll be less than 1 or 2% are in that very high category. And the vast majority of them are either drafty, building design, or architect.
Yeah, it's just like a few times you get clients coming to us with an architectural design with like concrete roofs.
Yep.
And obviously it's not going to fit into your standard stuff. So it's good to be able to, you're trying to give them that information up front, and they're like, oh, well, how much does that make a difference? And it's like, well, a lot.
It does, absolutely, massively. As soon as you start talking about unorthodox, what I'll call unorthodox design or construction methods, the cost impact for the client is massive, and so that factors. Yeah. So we can factor it in that way. There's the other way that sort of thing can also be catered for is if there's something there that's if it's not necessarily a high-end architectural job, but there's something that's I don't know, so it's a septic tank, or something that's unique about that particular job, you can actually fold it in as an extra. So there's a ProCalc actually enables to do that. So yeah.
Thanks, Pat.
No worries. Del, thanks for the webinar. What is the material labour prices updating time period, and what is the method of acquiring them? Good question. So what we do is we update it every 30 days, and the way that we update that is actually all on builders' data. Okay, so what happens is that builders put jobs through ProCalc, and then we double back and actually touch base with them to work out what their detailed estimates were, so that we're constantly updating our numbers, so that they're always and this is all over Australia, and so we're always making sure that we've got the most up-to-date numbers. I would like to think that we have got the most accurate numbers in the country, but I'm biased, so yeah, that's that. So yeah. Any other questions, guys? Jonathan?
Richard, one more. Is there, with the sort of exported report, is there any not, I suppose, editability with that, with like logos and bits and pieces? Because I've sort of in my head I'm thinking, like, if we're doing that, is the client not just going to look at Google ProCalc and then just do it for themselves?
No, we don't service
individual
end users. No. Homeowners. Okay. So if you go to our website, on the front page of our website, we actually have a line there saying, hey, if you're a homeowner and you want to report, talk to your builder or your architect, because we're not going to talk.
Okay.
We're not going to service you. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, but look, but you have touched on something else there that I probably should just mention. One of the key things about ProCalc is that it gives industry rates, and so as soon as a builder, we have had the question about builders putting their own logo on it before. As soon as a builder puts their own logo on a ProCalc report, what happens is it then becomes, in the client's eyes, it then becomes the builder's quote. And so if it's a bit high for the client, the builder loses the ability to say, well, look, this is the industry, these are industry rates. Let's sit down and strike out what you can't afford, because all of a sudden the client's looking at the builder going, hang on, are you touching me up here? So the idea is it presents independent third-party data. Okay, so yeah, that's why we don't put a builder's logo on it. Obviously,
yeah, that makes more sense.
Yeah, and when it comes to their detailed design, absolutely, that's exactly the right time to put your thing on it. But the idea of ProCalc is that it's purely a qualifying piece where you're determining whether the client can afford the project or not. You're just using to work out whether it's worthwhile you investing time in their project. All right. So folks, any other questions that you might have about whether it's about the engaging with the client or pricing or ProCalc or whatever you like? No, that's great. Good on you, folks. Well, look, thank you, and I hope this has been a really helpful session for you. I appreciate that taking an hour and a quarter out of your day is an investment from you. So thank you for doing that. That's good of you. I hope that it's been a really fruitful thing, and I hope that I've sort of helped you see potential opportunities in your business. And look, we'll send around some information later on this afternoon that basically covers a lot of the things that we'll also send around a recording. Sometimes the recordings take a little bit to process, so that may come a little bit later, but we'll send around the basically all the links that I've talked about so you can get moving forward on that. So, and thank you for your questions, and thank you for being a great audience. Thanks, folks. Good on you. Bye for now. See ya.